Literary Essay, Lesson 8. So today we're going to be talking about how to write an introduction for your literary essay. So our learning target is, I can draft an introduction that includes a thesis that precisely states my claim on the story's theme, gives a gist of the story, and gets my readers to care about my opinion. So we're going to first start by looking at 2 to 3 mentor literary essay introductions, and we're going to talk about what we notice about the structure and the elements of each of these introductions. We're also going to talk about what each author does to hook the reader in. So what is there to grab the reader's attention and make them want to keep reading. And then we are going to use what you've learned to write your own literary essay introduction. Our new vocabulary term for this lesson is introduction, and an introduction is the beginning section of an essay intended to introduce the topic and make a claim with reasons. So our first example of an introduction from a literary essay comes from an essay on the short story 11. So here's the introduction. Some people think that growing up is fun or exciting, having birthday parties and blowing out candles, but smart kids know that growing up is not all fun. Your old clothes don't fit anymore, and you can't play the same games, and you need to worry about new things like money or work. In the story 11 by Sandra Cisneros, Rachel comes to an understanding of what being 11 really feels like. So in this example, we can see that our author decided to hook the reader in by relating to their lives or connecting to the reader. And at the end, we get the thesis and the story 11 by Sandra Cisneros. Rachel comes to an understanding of what being 11 really feels like. So we know what her topic of the story is going to be, and we know what the rest of her body paragraphs are going to be. So she does a great job at connecting to the reader, but she doesn't really tell us what the story is about. So that is one downfall to this example, because she doesn't tell us what the story is about. Remember, you do need to tell a gist of the story, just a little blurb about what the story is about, so the reader knows. Because based on this paragraph, I have no idea what the story 11 is actually going to be about. Our example number 2 is on a literary essay about the Hunger Games. So this one is actually about a book. And I'm going to mention this here. When you are writing book titles, they need to be italicized or underlined. And here I've underlined it because the font that I have chosen for this slideshow does not allow me to italicize words, so it is underlined. So just make sure book titles or film titles are italicized or underlined, and then if you are doing a short story title, it's going to be in quotation marks. So here is this introduction paragraph. How far are you willing to go to help your family? The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins is a disturbing tale about a possible future featuring the Hunger Games, an annual reality TV event pitting teens together in a battle for death. Katniss Everdeen, a 16-year-old girl, poached animals to take care of her widowed mother and 12-year-old sister Primrose. Every year, she hoped to avoid being chosen in the drawing as tribute for the Hunger Games. Katniss was faced with many hard choices and consistently chose to sacrifice to help her family. The Hunger Games supports my belief that it is important to sacrifice for your loved ones. So this author chose to hook the reader by asking a question, and that is perfectly fine. How far are you willing to go to help your family? So based on that, you get the reader thinking. You've asked them a question. How far am I willing to go for my family? And then she goes in and gives us a little bit about what the book is actually about, so we understand what's happening in the book without having to actually read the entire book. And then her last sentence is her thesis. The Hunger Games supports my belief that it is important to sacrifice for your loved ones. Now, I don't really like the fact that she said my belief, because in my opinion, when you are writing a paper like a literary essay, it's supposed to be very professional and you need to take yourself completely out of it. So we're not going to use words like I or my. And I don't know what the instructions were for this paper. Maybe that's perfectly fine. But when you are writing the paper for me, please don't use I or my. I want you to take yourself completely out of the paper. So instead of saying the Hunger Games supports my belief, you can just say the Hunger Games supports the idea that it is important to sacrifice for your loved ones. So simple change. We can easily change that. Alright, and our last example comes from the short story The Marble Champ. So our introduction to this literary essay is, literature often tells the story of underdogs who rise up in the end. The Mighty Ducks is the story of a ragtag hockey team that ends up winning the state championship. Cinderella tells the story of the rejected youngest sister who ends up marrying the prince. The Marble Champ by Gary Soto is also an underdog story. It tells not only about Lupe winning the marble championship, it also tells that she overcomes her athletic difficulties through hard work and family support. And I know what you're thinking, but I did not write this paragraph. I know you're thinking that because of the hockey reference, but I can promise you I didn't write this. I really didn't. But anyways, let's talk about some of the good things in this. First, she grabs your attention by saying literature often tells the story of underdogs who rise up at the end. Great. She then gives some examples of other stories. So she's making a connection to other stories. However, The Mighty Ducks is a movie title, so it needs to be underlined or italicized. Cinderella is also a story title, so it needs to either be underlined or italicized or in quotation marks. Sometimes it's a short story, sometimes it's a book, so whichever version you're using, but those are two things that are not done. The Marble Champ, though, is in quotations, so they got it right the third time. And then the author does a great job at kind of telling us what the story is about, that it's an underdog story. We know that, and based on their thesis, we know that she plays marbles, and that's about all we know. But then at the end, she does have the thesis. It tells not only about Lupe winning the marble championship, it also tells that she overcomes her athletic difficulties through hard work and family support. So we do know what the rest of her paper will be about. Alright, so now that we've looked at 3 different examples and we talked about good things and we talked about bad things in each of those examples, let's talk about the introduction structure. So the first thing you're going to have is you're going to want to grab the reader's attention, and this is the hook. And we talked about how we can hook readers into our papers when we are doing persuasive writing. But you always want to have some sort of hook when you are writing a paper, because if you don't grab your reader's attention, then that person's not going to want to read your paper. So you can use a quote. You can use a quote from the story you're going to talk about. You can use a quote from another story as long as it fits your topic. You can connect to the reader. You can ask a question. You can state a fact. Anything like that that's going to connect to the reader, or you can connect to other similar stories. So like if it's an underdog story, you can talk about Cinderella. That's perfectly fine. Just make sure you're grabbing that reader's attention because you want them to read your story. After you've grabbed their attention, which is great because now they're hooked and they want to continue reading, you're going to quickly summarize the story. So you're going to make sure that you have the title of the story and the author. And I've already mentioned this, but we're going to mention it again. Short story titles are always in quotation marks. Books and films should be italicized or underlined. Mine were underlined because I could not italicize this font. You are going to be using a normal font, either Arial or Times New Roman, and you can italicize those. So as long as you have italicized or underlined, I will accept either. Italicized is more common, but whichever. At this point, I don't really care. As long as you have italicized or underlined, you'll be good. Okay, and then you're going to tell us what the story is about. So I know who the title of the story, I know who wrote the story, but I want to kind of know what the story is about. So you're just going to give a very, very short summary. So what is the gist? What are the important parts that you think the reader needs to know before you continue on with your paper. And then the last sentence of your paragraph is going to be the thesis statement. And we already created our thesis statements in lessons 3 and 4, so all you have to do is simply copy and paste what you already have. If you need to tweak it a little so it fits better with your introduction, then do that, but that should already be written. So when I look at your introductions, I want to see the hook. I want to be grabbed. I want to be interested in your paper, so grab my attention. Then I want you to summarize it. Title, author, give me the gist. What are the important parts of this story that you think I need to know? And then I want to see your thesis statement. Now that we've talked about the structure, let's talk about an example that I wrote. And the other side of the fence is Raymond, with his arms down to his side and the palms tucked up behind him, running in his very own style. And it's the first time I ever saw that, and I almost stopped to watch my brother Raymond on his first run. The story, Raymond's Run, by Toni Cade Bambara, tells about how a girl, Hazel, is working very hard to win an upcoming race. While she is training for her race, she also has to look after her brother Raymond. What she does not know is that Raymond has been watching her all along. Raymond's Run shows that sometimes helping others can offer a greater sense of accomplishment than winning, because Hazel looks after her brother, is protective of her brother, and is happier when she sees her brother running than when she won the race. So I chose to grab the reader's attention by using a quote from the story. After the quote, I then tell you the name of the story, the author of the story, and then I tell you a little bit about what the story is about, so you understand what the story is going to be about, so you understand the paper just a little bit better. And then at the very end, I have my thesis statement with my reasons that support that claim that I have made, so you know exactly what to expect throughout the rest of my paper. And if you're watching this, yeah, I hope you're watching this, but don't tell the other students. If you're watching this, then you can just use this paragraph. Just copy this paragraph right into a Google Doc. Got that? Okay, so now that we've looked at examples, I've gone over the structure of how to write an introduction paragraph. You are now going to write your own introduction paragraph, and I want to see that structure that we talked about. I want to see your hook, I want to see your summary, and I want to see your thesis statement. And before you do that, you do have some exit ticket questions. So here are your exit ticket questions. Question 1, what is an introduction? Question 2, how is the introduction of a literary essay structured? And third, write your favorite sentence from your literary essay introduction.